Love, they say it's a beautiful thing. People generally want to love people and be loved in return. And this certainly includes persons with disability. On the program today, our focus will be on the conversation we started last week, disability, dating, and marriage for persons with disability. And last week, our guest was Gift Ezeani. She was on the program and she was indeed a delight. Today promises to be super exciting as well, as our guest today is from a different cluster within the disability community. She is a hearing impaired person or a deaf person. She is going to be giving us her perspective about what dating, marriage, the concept of love, what does it mean for a deaf person. Last week, we got a perspective of someone with visual impairment. Today, our perspective will be from the lens of a deaf person. This is how I'd like to welcome you to the program Hitches and Voices on independent television and radio. My name is Kingsley Okoje, and my sign language interpreter for today is Cynthia Godwin Aya. We'll go to the show proper, but before we do so, let me quickly introduce my guest properly. Her name is Millicent Ogbodu. She is a staff with the Edo State Civil Service. Millicent, welcome to Hitches and Voices.
Thank you.
All right, I'll start by asking the very first question. There's this, notion or perception that people have about the deaf, that the deaf do not trust other persons apart from themselves. Is that exactly true?
Yes, it is true. Yes.
Oh, you mean deaf people find it hard to trust other persons who are not deaf? And why so?
Why? The response is very, very clear. Because of communication. For example, if a deaf person, for instance, wants to get married to a hearing person, and that person does not understand sign language, how are they going to communicate? People with disability often depend on others to help them. So also, hearing impaired persons, they depend on the hearing persons to be their ears. But in most cases, the deaf find it difficult to trust the hearing because of communication gap. But if the hearing person understands their language, it becomes an easy thing.
Fantastic. So let's move to the subject of love, dating, and marriage proper now. This issue of communication that you raise, does it influence the kind of person a deaf person wants to be in a relationship with? The issue of sign language?
They would prefer, because of that communication gap, a deaf person would always prefer to date a fellow deaf person. For instance, if a hearing person is communicating with a deaf person, and peradventure, even if he's a deaf as well, assuming they are in the room and there is no light, how will they communicate? So that's just our own little way of illustrating communication gap between the hearing and the deaf. The deaf will always prefer 100% to date. The deaf will prefer to date a fellow deaf person than a hearing person, so that they won't be in the dark at any point.
So what if you have someone who is not deaf, who is not hearing impaired, but understands sign language? Would a deaf person want to be in a relationship with that kind of a person?
Yes, I have it, but on very rare occasions. I have a friend who is deaf but got married to a hearing person, although the mother of the boy is also deaf. So you can see that it's still the deaf community. So, but in most cases, the deaf prefer to get married to a fellow deaf person. That couple now that I said got married to a deaf person that got married to a hearing person, the family is doing well and they are okay.
All right. It is very obvious from what you've said that marrying within the deaf community is prevalent. Deaf persons prefer marrying within their community rather than finding love outside. But if someone who can understand sign language is available, a deaf person wouldn't mind engaging in a relationship with that person. I think that's the sense you've made.
Yes, she said yes.
All right. I know people are a bit curious. People would want to know if a deaf person is in a relationship or goes into marriage with another deaf person and they have children, how would they communicate with their child? How would they raise their child such that it does not affect the speech of that child? People will be curious about that.
Most times, hearing impaired couple often have assistance from extended family members, like mother of the bride, mother of the groom, or any of their relation who can help probably to stay with them, or the children having to go and spend some time with those hearing persons to assist them. Then in their own way, in the absence of all of these other persons, they can use the television, expose the children to sound from radio, from television, from cartoons, from phones, so that they can build their hearing and also learn how to talk.
So it's not a challenge if a deaf person is in a relationship with a deaf person and they give birth. It doesn't automatically mean that the child would start having speech defects. Because people have that notion.
No. That it is God that has made that. None of them, in most cases, have ever given birth to a deaf person. It is very, very rare, although they are there. But they always give birth to hearing persons and they're able to train the children to hear and also to speak.
Fantastic. So, as a deaf person, she would have interacted with deaf persons who oftentimes try to find love. What is the most difficult thing they face in trying to find a partner? What are their challenges?
Okay, he said in most cases, hearing impaired persons, they don't have challenge in having, in finding love. But she wants to understand if your question is for a deaf person to a deaf person or a deaf person and a hearing person. Which of them?
Fantastic. So if it's for a deaf person, it's not quite difficult for them. But if it's for a hearing person, it's a bit challenging.
Yes, she wants to know.
Okay, but I'm asking generally.
Okay, it is only when it is deaf to a hearing person that they will have challenge because of sign language. But if it is deaf to deaf, they usually don't have challenges. Because of communication gap, there will be a challenge between the hearing person and the deaf person. And the same trust issue that she raised before will also be there.
All right. I would like to ask her a personal question. Before she got married, did she have any experience where a hearing person asked her out? And how did she handle that?
She said yes.
What was that experience like for her?
She said she even dated a hearing person before, but it was very, very difficult. I tried to force myself to understand his speech. When he's talking, I try to lip read, but I mean, it was very frustrating and I wasn't feeling comfortable at all. Sometimes we try to write, but that takes a lot of time and also it spoils my emotions. So I decided that I cannot marry a hearing person. I promised myself that I was going to marry a deaf person no matter what, that God will help me to raise my children. And that's where I am today. I am married to a deaf man from Benin. I have 4 kids and we are happy together.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right, we'll go on a quick break. We've been having a very interesting conversation with Millicent Odogwu, who's been sharing her experience with us, as perspective as far as love, dating, relationship, marriage for people with hearing impairment. When we come back from the break, we'll continue our conversation with Millicent. Welcome back from that break. If you've been following the program, you agree with me that we've been having a very exciting conversation with Millicent. She's been sharing her thoughts about love, marriage, and relationship for persons with hearing impairment. And for me, I've been having a nice time just listening to her. But I would also want to ask her a very important question. As deaf persons, what's your personal experience, or what have you noticed about the interference of other family members in your relationship?
Okay, for me, my personal experience has been a nice one. I'm very okay. My mother-in-law has been very helpful to me and my family.
So is it also important that people around you, your family, understand sign language as well?
No, they don't understand the standard sign language. We just use body gesture and sometimes we write also. Most times we write. So we are able to understand each other.
Okay, we are in an era of technology now. I mean, technology has evolved over time. And I'm wondering within me, does technology help in any way to foster relationship between, whether it's a deaf stroke, a non-deaf person, or a deaf to a deaf person? Has technology helped the deaf community to enjoy love, to enjoy relationship, to enjoy marriage better?
Yes, it has been very helpful. That we're able to use WhatsApp to communicate, we're able to do video calls, and they have been very helpful, exchanging messages and pleasantries through technological gadgets, especially WhatsApp has been very helpful to deaf community. Yes.
Fantastic. I mean, I'm wondering within me that in an era where these things didn't exist, I'm sure somehow the deaf community still find way to, find love, amongst themselves. There's this perspective too that people oftentimes want to take advantage of deaf people, particularly the deaf ladies. What's our thoughts on that?
Well, it depends. It depends on the context you are looking at it from. But in most cases, yes, people take undue advantage of them still because of communication gap. Most young deaf ladies cannot communicate with their parents. So whatever that is going on with them, within them, around them, they cannot communicate to their parents and also their loved ones. So communication gap remains the major challenge of persons with hearing impairments.
So communication is a big challenge within that community for those with hearing impairment. I mean,
Yes, it is.
if they could communicate effectively, it's obvious people who take advantage of them will not have the opportunity to do so, I guess.
Yes.
All right, fantastic. I know people are also curious. I mean, and I'm sure she has seen people with hearing impairments marrying people who don't have any form of disability whatsoever. For instance, within the blind cluster, for those who are visually impaired, they feel it's more convenient for them to marry somebody who is without any disability. But I've learned today on the show that for deaf persons, they feel more comfortable marrying someone who is within their cluster, and they
Yes.
feel it's safer for them, that way.
Yes.
But generally, what misconception does she think people have about deaf people and how they find love and relationship? What's that misconception she thinks people have about them?
Okay, the first misconception is that people feel that deaf persons, they usually get angry easily and that they are very violent.
That's a common misconception.
And that's, yes, and that depends on the situation that deaf has found his or herself. But generally, it's not true. I know that it can be very frustrating when they are trying to communicate and nobody understands them. But that notwithstanding, we still have a lot of deaf persons out there who are loving and caring, and they are nice to be with.
Okay, let's move into, I know this is outside love, dating, relationship. Let's move to another concern that we've had concerning the deaf community for a long time, the issue of accommodation. I'm aware of the fact that many landlords, landladies, owners of property often decline giving deaf people accommodation or renting their houses to deaf persons. What does she think about this? Is it not worrisome to her?
It is true. Sometimes the landlord themselves feel that because these people are deaf, they cannot pay. And they also feel that deaf people can also make trouble with other persons. But all of these are misconceptions. The deaf persons are not animals. We are humans like every other person. So if we go out in search of a place to rest our heads, it is within what we can afford. We don't go for what we cannot afford, and we never go out in search of accommodation with the intention of not wanting to pay rent or causing trouble. So we should be accepted in the society, and we should know that every one of us have his or her own challenges. If it is communication, for me, the phone has made it very, very easy for us to communicate with other people. But people don't even want to open up to accept us, so it becomes very frustrating.
All right, beautiful. Back to the love conversation and the relationship conversation. We've discovered that deaf people get married very early. You see 21, 25, deaf people in their mid-20s, early 20s, they get married very quickly. Why so?
You said the question is quite funny. That for her, she feels that whenever anybody finds love and you are matured enough, you have found love and you can take care of yourself and the family, why not? What matters it all is, has the person found love? If yes, and the person is matured enough, has all the resources, the person can go ahead to get married.
Prefer marrying within their cluster. Have they had situations where family would want to force them to marry people without, or a person without a disability? Have there been experiences like that?
Yes. Personally, when I was young, I asked my parents, please, can you allow me to get married to a deaf person? My father said it depends on me. And I asked my father again, do you mean it depends on me means I can marry either a hearing or a deaf person? My father still said, yes, it depends on me. Okay, but my mother actually wanted me to get married to a hearing person.
All right. But I'll ask this very final question. People also think, but I've seen, okay, if I say I've seen, some people will question it. But I've noticed that most deaf ladies are very beautiful. I mean, does she agree with that?
Yes.
I've seen a lot of beautiful deaf ladies in my lifetime, and that's quite fascinating. All right, it's been an interesting conversation on the program today, discussing or having a chat with Millicent Ogbodu. She's been on about the subject of love, relationship, dating for persons with hearing impairment. And I hope you learned a couple of things from her today. And she's been able to dispel some of those misconceptions people have about people with hearing impairment, particularly when they give birth to children. People often think that, oh, automatically, because the parents can't talk, it's definitely going to affect the speech of that child. That's really not the case. Thank you for following us on the program today. Thank you for watching on TV and listening on radio. We'll do this again next week. My name is Kingsley Okoje, saying spot the hitch and be a voice. Goodbye.